cleaned up,
Alright,
and
well,
took out my
webcam
drawing
get in the
supplies,
way.
doing my best not even to look at anything
Yeah, I mean, that is
except
a
the paper in front of
massive
me.
freaking
There
screen.
was no
So let me see
sound
if I can
except the
do
ticking of clocks.
this.
Bedtime, Aunt Mendel said from
I
behind
think I'm
me.
just gonna keep it off.
I flinched. Where had she come from? It was only 9 p.m. But I was so bored and on edge that I followed without any complaints. This will be your last chance to use the bathroom until morning, Aunt Mandel informed me. A keyring glittered in her hand. She was going to lock me in. Your parents will be so disappointed if you got yourself hurt during the night, Aunt Mandel mused by way of explanation. Then she shut the door and twisted the key.
I have to get 3 more headshots.
I lay on the hard cot with my eyes open. Aunt Mandel's words had sounded like a threat. One way or another, I was locked in here with those things. Something clattered behind me. I spun. A group
Hey!
of figurines
You're
had fallen
gonna
to the
get
floor
hurt.
beside the bed. In the moonlight, they looked like a pile of gaunt, starved corpses. I imagined them starting to move, rushing me, swarming up the blankets. Something was moving in the painting on the wall. The hunter and his dogs had completely disappeared. In their place was a nighttime forest clearing lit by firelight, hung with banners bearing the same weird symbol from earlier. A boy my age lay on an ancient slab of stone, with 5 hooded figures surrounding him. The pale light glittered on their armbands and the daggers. When I looked back to the figurines, they were at the edge of the bed, in a row like marching soldiers. Pointed porcelain teeth glimmered inside their tiny mouths, and each face wore a vicious, bloodthirsty expression. That was it then. Those things moved when I wasn't looking. I just had to keep my eyes on them, I thought. I sat up in the cot with my heart pounding, trying not to even blink. If I fell asleep... I was still in a sitting position when I awoke with my head on my chest, drooling.
I just don't want
Morning sunlight streamed through the window. My sleep had been restless, and I felt more drained than rested. As I ate the rye bread and water Aunt Mandel provided for breakfast, I noticed 2 tiny puncture marks on my right wrist.
I don't want it to be like
I spent the
massive.
day outside again, as far as I could get from the animated keepsakes and grotesque art. Apart from butterflies, beetles, passing cars, and Aunt Mandel's shadow in the window watching me,
Should be okay now.
I didn't see anyone all day. Boiled potatoes and cabbage were back on the table at 7 sharp, and while I ate and tried to ignore the words on the live, laugh, love sign shaping themselves into words I didn't understand. As before, Aunt Mandel locked me in my room. This time, though, I didn't dare look around.
Pony boy.
Like a scared animal, I burrowed deep into my smelly wooden blankets, only leaving a tiny hole near my head to
I can
breathe
barely hear
and peer
myself.
out of.
What about this?
If I pretended to sleep, I hoped sleep would come. Sleep, and nothing else.
Peekaboo.
I was just dozing off when I heard, or thought I heard, a key turning
I'll
in the
just
door
turn it up
lock.
all the way then.
Someone or something was trying very hard to slip silently into my room.
How does that
Through
sound?
my hole in the blankets, I glimpsed a dark shape crawling toward me on the
How does
rug.
that sound?
I shut my eyes tight and
Does it sound
pretended to
okay?
sleep.
I think that sounds okay.
Seconds later, I felt the stickiness of saliva on my forearm and a sharp puncture. It was like my life was leaching out through my arm. Although I tried to keep quiet and still, the shock of it made me yelp. The figure paused, then retreated, crawling backwards out the door on all fours with freakish speed. I didn't dare move or open my eyes. But when I did, I saw Aunt Mandel's keyring on the floor, shining in the moonlight. Dizzy from blood loss, I staggered from the cot and grabbed the keys. I looked at it curiously for only a moment before slipping them into my pajama shirt and collapsing into a deep but troubled sleep. The next morning, I awoke
Hey,
to the
why do I
sound
have
of
a
Aunt
crown?
Mandel storming around the house,
So I have a crown,
opening
that's
drawers
cool.
and slamming cabinets. "Where are my keys?" she demanded. "If you've taken them..." I shook my head vigorously.
There's
It
2.
was true, after all. I hadn't
So-
taken them. It was more like they'd been left in my room. The metal was so cold,
I
it
don't
seemed to
have
burn
this
against
way,
the
so
skin of
let's
my
just go
chest.
straight down.
"I'm going to retrace my steps," Aunt Mandel warned, emphasizing each word slowly. "If you've stolen from me, I'm going to find out about it, and the consequences will be terrible." I shuddered, but I kept my mouth shut. Armando turned on a heel and slammed the door. When I heard a car start, where else had she been last night? I knew that I was about to be left alone in the house of locked doors. But I had the keys. Soon, the silence was complete. I peered around the bedroom door. Nothing moved in the dusty light. I kept my eyes away from Aunt Mandel's knickknacks, not wanting to even imagine what they might be twisting themselves into now that she was gone. Instead, I unlocked one door after another, not even sure what I was searching for. There was an
Fuck.
room with a desk for
What a
paperwork,
weird ass, like.
antique furniture, and a display of at least 50 antique
It was
postcards
weird
on
how
the
they can
wall.
hop over you.
I watched the pool of blood begin to spread across the lovely images of old-world European cities. The black shadows of planes moved across the spreading bloodstains. A crescendo of roaring engines
you finish
rose
your
from the
bottle
enemy
yet?
squadron, so loud I thought
No,
for
you
sure
wanna
Aunt
stretch?
Mandel would somehow hear it. I quickly shut the door. I passed through rooms of covered furniture and old sports equipment, canning supplies, luggage, always with some grim scene playing out in the background. Soon, I closed the door to the final room, Aunt Mandel's bedroom, with nothing to show for my efforts. I sighed. How on earth was I supposed to make the keys reappear without getting caught? As I pondered, I heard a loud clack. All of the knickknacks in the hallways had turned or tilted to one side, from figures in the paintings to glass statuettes of dogs. They were all pointing to the doorless, dead end of the hallway. But there was nothing to see down there. Or was there? As
Oh, I didn't
examined the
even
wood
get it
paneling,
unlocked. Are
I
you
noticed a
serious?
shallow,
What was
round
in there?
indentation where no key would ever fit, but a keyring might. As expected, Aunt Mandel's keyring was a near-perfect match once I placed it right. A square door, just large enough for an adult to squeeze through, popped out from the wall in front of me with a click. It had been so smartly hidden by the carpentry that I'd walked by it countless times without noticing anything unusual about the wall. A cool, musty breeze hissed through the gaps around it. I twisted the keyring and pulled it open. On the other side, a stone staircase led down into the cellar that I never known existed. Like the door, it was a space designed for crawling, not walking. I snatched a dim flashlight from one of the spare rooms. Guided by its flickering, grimy beam, I moved on all fours into the cobwebby darkness. The tunnel was old, but not unused. There was no dust on the stone steps I crawled down on my hands and knees. Even so, it was so dark I nearly fell from the drop-off at the end of the stairs. It was only about 3 feet high, but that's a lot when you're 10 years old. I lowered myself down the slippery rock into the pentagonal chamber, wondering what on earth I'd gotten myself into. On each wall hung one of those red banners with a white circle and a funny X in the middle. In the center of the cellar floor was a big flat rock, like one from the painting, with weird symbols carved all around the edges. In a locked safe, that I now had the key to, I found black and white pictures of a much younger Aunt Mandel, with a bunch of other people in uniforms, some yellow documents in that funny language the embroidery had turned itself into, and a dagger like the one from the painting. I had no idea what it all meant, but I knew I wasn't supposed to
So
be looking at any
confused.
of
Where
this
the hell
stuff,
are the chests?
especially when I dug deeper into the weird old reports and found the pictures of the skeletons and people and the stuff that was being done to them. I was horrified and disgusted, but I thought about something one of my teachers had said. If you see something bad or dangerous, you need to tell an adult about it. But who would believe me without proof? After hesitating, I scooped up one of the folders with the sickening photos and paperwork, then clambered out of that awful basement. I was panting by the time I crawled out of the hallway. I looked around at the knickknacks, art pieces, embroidery, and other junk lining Aunt Mandel's walls. I was starting to have a different idea about what was happening in this weird old house. Maybe whatever was messing with Aunt Mandel's trifles weren't trying to scare me or hurt me. Maybe it was trying to warn me. No sooner had the thought passed through my head when a shelf gave out beside me, causing figurines to shatter on the floor in front of me. The broken pieces formed a word. Run.
I'm so lost on where this
If
thing
it
is.
hadn't been for that sudden shock, I wouldn't have looked up to see Aunt Mandel climbing, spider-like, along the ceiling, her head twisted around to glare at me. she hissed something in a strange language. I didn't need any further motivation to follow the shattered ceramic advice. As I barreled toward the light of the front door, I could hear shelves, display cases, and clocks collapsing in Aunt Mandle's
Headshots
path,
count on these
buying me
things too.
time. I burst out into the bright sunlight, Aunt Mandle's paper still clutched tight in my hand. I looked desperately to my left and right. The streets on this stately, old-world style of town were all too quiet. I felt hot tears running down my cheeks. There was no one to help me. An engine rumbled. An antique car out for a Sunday drive was pulling up to the next intersection over. I charged toward it, waving my arms, papers flying everywhere. It was a miracle that the middle-aged driver was going slow enough to avoid hitting me. He stopped, and although I was too out of breath to explain, the pictures on my face said it all. As I climbed into the passenger seat, I twisted around to look behind me and saw Aunt Mandle's shadow slinking back.
Oh,
into
what the
house.
fuck?
Everything that happened after that was a blur. My parents came back from their vacation.
I thought I hit right, not left. The fuck did it pull out the chicken for?
It's through their investigation that I learned for the first time about the Holocaust, the Nazis, and their obsession with the occult.
What's the matter, sweetie?
Investigators attributed my story to trauma and an overactive imagination, but they were at a loss to clarify anything about what happened. The best guess was that the person I'd called Aunt had been a mentally deranged child of Elfriede Mandel, who immigrated illegally to the United States, despite her crimes, as part of Operation Paperclip. After all, how could Elfriede, born in 1913, still be alive to creep around on ceilings and feast on
It's
children's
kinda
blood?
whack how I can't melee it.
In any case, there was no evidence of any crime. The woman I called Aunt Mandel had just vanished. Back at home, my mother explained to me in hushed tones about the aunt who'd helped her grandparents escape from the ruins of Germany, who had ruled the family with an iron fist for as long as anyone could remember, who barely aged, just becoming more sadistic and demanding with each passing year. Now that a secret was out, she disappeared. But to where? There's been no trace of my strange aunt since I fled from a house at 10 years old, 20 years ago today. And yet, I have a horrible feeling that one day
They yummy.
I'll turn a corner and see that familiar, stern, white-jawed face and blonde bun barely aged a day, but looking very hungry. Go feed the chickens, Ma said, and bring in some eggs while you're at it. I did as I was told. It was a cold October morning. I went outside to feed the chicks, as I do most mornings. It's my job, and I don't mind doing it. I love the chicks, especially Birdman, the big, grumpy rooster who serves not only as my pet, but also as my alarm clock.
Such
He
a dope
didn't wake
name.
me up this particular morning, which was odd. Me and Ma live in the middle of nowhere, so when something out of the ordinary happens, it usually means trouble. Then, I saw the blood. The chicken coop, which my father built 2 summers ago, just before Ma kicked him out, seemed unprovoked. That said, a pool of thick, crimson-coloured blood lay at the foot of the entrance. Also at the entrance was my beloved Birdman, decapitated. I cried briefly, then I ran inside and told Ma, who became angry with me, like it was my fault or something. "You must have left it open last night," she snapped. "How many times do I have to tell you to lock that damn door at night?" I scratched my head. I knew I hadn't left it unlocked. No way. I may be 13, but I ain't stupid. "Nuh-uh," I said in a pouty voice, shaking my head. I still couldn't rid my mind of poor old Birdman, lying headless at the foot of the coop, caked in his own blood. Ma cupped her hand in a threatening gesture. She pursed her lips, as she does, and scowled at me. Ma ain't cruel per se, but she's no Mary Poppins either, if you catch my drift. "But, Birdman," I continued to pout. Ma rolled her eyes, then hurried outside to look for herself.
Where
And when
are
she came
all
back
the
in,
hookers?
she was furious. Go outside and clean him up, Ma ordered. I was about to complain when she threw a long wooden spoon at me, missing me by an inch. Do
Oh,
as I
I
say,
suck.
Alexander, now. I did as I was told. Ma only calls me Alexander when she's really upset.
He's getting
With my
attacked
chin to
by
my
a
chest, I
shark.
lumbered across a long, narrow backyard, heading toward the coop. My heart was thumping like a jackrabbit. My mouth was dry as toast. I'm not as tough as Pa, not even close. He ain't scared of nothing. Too bad he went away. A steady stream of tears was sliding down my cold, pink cheeks. The last thing I wanted to do was see Birdman like that. Poor old Birdman. I remember the day Pa brought him home. The rooster was so proud and cocky and brightly feathered.
Landmark
Pa even let me know
discovered.
him. Standing at the entrance, shovel in hand, I scooped the ravaged rooster up off the bile-coloured grass and salty wood chips. It was unsettling to say the least. Birdman's beady little eyes remained open, watching me during the entire process. I shoveled the mutilated rooster into a large, green garbage bag. Then I dragged across the crisp, coffee-coloured leaves, blanketing the forest floor which runs along the edge of our property. I was crying the entire time. A thought came to mind. Whoever or whatever did this to Birdman might be watching me right now. I froze. If I were to be eaten by some creature out in the woods, who would find my body?
What the hell is
I
going
brushed
on
aside
here?
my disparaging thoughts and continued to crunch along the rim of the forest, stopping at a small clearing. I buried my rooster. The ground was frigid and uncooperative, but I managed as best as I could. Afterward, I was as hungry as a bear. I ate 3 plates of pasta and still felt peckish. Burying my dead animal is hard work, let me tell you. I couldn't fall asleep that night. I wondered who or what could have done that to my beloved Birdman. There were no tracks leading to or from the coop. No sign of a break-in or tampering. Nothing. Could have been a neighbour's dog, I thought. Except the floor of the coop was raised, so tunnelling wasn't an option. Plus, I couldn't imagine how a mangy mutt could have penetrated the lock. None of this made sense. Finally, after tossing and turning for hours, I slept. Then,
What are you
it
doing?
happened again.
Hey,
I woke up late the
Maya.
following morning. As
What
2
are you
days in a
doing,
row.
sweet pea?
A miracle. As I hurried outside to feed the flock, I noticed something peculiar. At first, I hoped it was just my imagination. Then, as I inched closer toward the foul chicken coop, I stopped, dead in my tracks. The animals inside the coop had been slaughtered. Each and every one. Fresh globs of blood and gore stained the surrounding mesh, turning it a deep crimson red. The entrance, however, remained locked and intact. I fell to my knees and puked. I couldn't help myself. That's impossible, Ma bellowed when I told her. Her eyes were full of accusation. She brushed past me
Oh
from the
yeah,
outside.
finally. I
Still,
can
no
barely hit my
nightgown
shots
to have
though.
a
I'm
look.
so bad.
She brought a shotgun. I ran into my bedroom and watched from the safety of my window. I didn't exactly trust that look in Ma's eyes, nor did I trust the ensemble of carcasses scattered across the coop.
I have to reset that.
Ma surveilled our entire property before re-entering our cozy country home. I was ordered to dispose of the dead chickens straight away. My protests proved impotent. I cursed her as I fetched my shovel yet again, unhappy to waste this glorious Sunday morning burying birds. As I marched closer to the coop, the feeling of being watched stole over me. Cautiously, I glanced over my left shoulder, looking deep into the looming forest. Was an unknown assailant lurking in the woods, watching me, waiting for the appropriate time to attack? It was impossible.
Hi,
This
sweet
put a jump
pea.
in my step. One
What are
thing
you
was
doing?
certain.
You having
I
fun
didn't
watching
want to
Coco
end up
Melon?
like poor old Birdman. There were 11 chickens in the flock, all dismembered. Some were decapitated, but many had been strangled. Their tiny, tortured tongues lay leaking in their broken yellow beaks. One cheek had both its legs ripped off, its plumage stained with its own blood and feces. It was gruesome.
Hi!
Nothing could have prepared me for such far
Yeah, you're
wretchedness.
starting to learn how to
I was
wave.
totally repulsed.
You're growing so much, my
Digging
love.
their grave was a daunting task. and not without its pitfalls.
I saw
But I
somebody
did it
up here,
anyway.
so
It took all day.
probably about to
At
get
one point,
fucking
a chicken
moited.
flew off my shovel and rolled away. Could this day get any worse? I hoped not. I prayed for Pa to return home.
Oh, if I can hit my
Surely,
shots,
I would know a
bruh.
more efficient way to dispose of these corpses.
Yeah,
I mean, there must be
daddy.
a better way than this. I was
Bless
cold
you.
and tired and miserable. Worse, I was scared half to death, and I knew Ma was too. I slept poorly all week. My mind was in overdrive. What kind of monster would harm those innocent chicks? Someone or something was penetrated in that concrete. How? Not to the point. After mutilating our entire flock, they must have locked and closed the door, then split, leaving no footprints, tracks, no evidence whatsoever behind. It was as if a ghost had murdered our flock. Slowly, things began to
Holy
return to
shit,
normal,
I'm so
as they do
bad.
in real life. Ma brought home more chicks, and this time she set up an electric fence around the pen to ward off any predators. That ought to do it, she said. I hoped she was right. This time, I refused to become friends with the animals. I didn't want to be heartbroken yet again. Except, I did end up befriending our new rooster. I couldn't help myself. He was an amazing bird. I named him Alistair, but shortened it to Alice. One morning, Alice didn't wake me up. Instead, I was awakened by Ma's persistent squawking. Something was off. It probably wasn't good. Ma was on the phone with the police. She was completely out of her mind, talking in circles.
So who is this man
Bloody
shooting at,
murder.
though?
I went outside to check things out. The coop was intact and seemingly not tampered with. The flock, however, was murdered. Blood and bone beats and strangled it up. It was a sad sight.
Definitely seemed
What
like
did
a
these
bot.
animals do to deserve this?
Am I
was
playing
outraged.
bots? Is that
I
all I'm...
wanted to get to the bottom of this.
Is that why I'm getting
fast.
kills?
So I called Taylor.
What's the
the
matter, my
BFF,
love?
for help.
You want more Cheerios?
Taylor arrived full of spirit. To her, this was
I know
fun.
you love your Cheerios.
She
You're a
grabbed my
sweet
hand
little
and
bee.
led me deep into the forest to start her investigation. She wanted to search for anything unusual.
Go.
There must be clues, she said in an excited voice. We spent all day playing in the woods. We saw a plethora of birds, a dray of squirrels, a red-bellied
If I
snake,
give her more
and
than
even
like
a
5
white-tailed
or
deer,
6, they're gonna be all
but
over the
nothing
floor.
out of the ordinary. These woods are home
Not
to
what I
eastern
wanted to do.
coyotes, red
Not what I
foxes,
wanted to
and the
do.
occasional black bear, Taylor told me matter-of-factly. But those creatures only come out at night, and not even a brilliant bear, she concluded, is clever enough to infiltrate a chicken coop, not with that electric fence and all. We were stumped. Taylor joined us for a hearty dinner, during which she suggested we purchase a surveillance camera. Ma agreed. The next day, Ma went to town
Hello,
to stock up
dude.
on chickens yet again, but this time she brought home a
Crop
brand new surveillance
disguise?
camera,
No way.
which I
Oh,
had the
or
displeasure of
tip.
trying to set up. By now,
How
I
does
was
this
worried about
disguise
Ma.
do?
She was
Ha
clinging to
ha!
leave.
No way.
When I suggested we ask Pa for help, she got mad at me, so I kept my mouth shut after that. Even the
Aw,
cops were baffled.
man.
Our neighbours, and I used the
I
term
didn't know that
loosely,
was a thing.
seeing how our
That's so
closest neighbour
sick.
was a 10-minute bike ride away, were put on high alert. This was big news. Everyone in town was talking about it.
Run, run, run.
Then, it happened again. Our entire flock was dismembered. Random chicken parts and bloodstained feathers were everywhere, but no tracks.
Hi,
Not any
sweet
sign
pea.
of disruption, as far as I could tell. I ran inside and called Taylor, who was most intrigued. She rushed straight over after school. I stayed home that day to clean up the carnage. I spent the remainder of the afternoon alone in my room, sulking. I didn't want to bury any more birds. By now, there's an animal graveyard in
Oh,
my
it just
backyard,
died back there.
which is immensely disturbing.
It's
I've
like an
watched
AI
Pet
or
Cemetery.
something.
I know how these stories end up. I waited for Taylor to arrive before scrolling through the surveillance video. She swiped the smartphone from my hand and proceeded to scroll through the hours of footage. She stopped suddenly with a face full of scorn. There it is. We both saw the creature. I don't know what this thing is, she said in a faraway voice. But whatever it is, it ain't right. We watched
I
this
see,
same
like,
scene over and over.
Doors.
It occurred at 4:09 in the morning. That's when the creature first appeared on the screen. The creature was covered in thick, matted fur. It looked tall, like a bear,
Don't look at
except
me.
it was skinny, like a human. It kind of looked like Bigfoot, without the footprints, of course. But it was impossible for us to get a proper look at it. The thing on screen was blurry, like a mirage or
I see one
something.
more person over here.
It almost seemed fake.
Hug zone, hug
The
zone,
first
hug
thing it did,
zone.
I swear to God, was look directly into the camera and wave. But not in a friendly way. More like a I know you can see me kind of way. Then the creature vanished, only to reappear a moment later inside the coop, where it proceeded to murder the entire flock of chickens, one by one, and it did so at an impossible speed. Wait, hold on a second, Taylor said. We rewatched the grisly scene at
Oh,
half
come on.
speed.
Don't let me start
She
lagging
shook
right
her
now.
head. That's impossible. We watched, transfixed, as the creature savagely ripped and clawed and gutted our poultry. The poor chicks didn't even know what killed them. It happened so fast. The rooster was killed first. The creature reached down and bit its head clean off. Then, in a series of bone-chilling attacks,
Just
it
gotta.
slayed the entire flock in similar fashion.
So, nobody noticed me.
This took 6 seconds in total. Afterward, the creature made a series of peculiar gestures, as if performing some sort of ritual.
No,
Blood was dripping from its monster-like face, its teeth stained in a superlative shade of red. The creature looked again at the surveillance camera, only this time I could feel it penetrating my mind. Taylor felt it too. She screamed and ran into the bathroom and locked herself inside. I watched the remainder of the video alone in my bedroom. I wish I hadn't. I watched the creature vanish into thin air, but before doing so, a strange and sickly voice entered my head. I'm coming for you, Alexander. It told me, using the deepest voice I'd ever heard. Yeah, I'm going to murder your mother, and that snot-nosed girlfriend of yours. I ran downstairs to show Ma the video. When I did, there was nothing on the screen but static. That's impossible, I said, scratching my head. Ma looked like she wanted to rip my head off and ram it down my throat. I called for Taylor, who was still in the bathroom. She stepped out, wiped the remaining tears from her freckled face, then called home. She left soon thereafter, and didn't even say
Repair.
goodbye.
Ah, repair. Look at that.
Last night,
Sorry,
I had a terrible dream. I dreamed I was the creature in the
You keep
woods,
building up.
killing those poor, innocent chickens. I felt their
See, if
souls
I had
being plucked
grenades,
from
I
their
could
bodies
definitely
as
spam
I
at the
clenched
base
my
of this.
meaty hands
Call
around
it a
their
day.
necks. I tore them each to shreds and delighted in doing so.
Yeah, so we move to the
I
left.
dreamed it was me who snuck into the house, crept up those long, creaky stairs, and wrapped my cold, bare hands around Ma's wrinkled neck. I watched with glee as she let out a final breath, her eyes bulging from their
So I head
sockets beneath the
that
pain.
way. Towards
I dreamed it was me who appeared outside Taylor's bedroom door,
Yeah, see, it's right
watching
there.
silently as she slept. I woke up in a
Hopefully I
pool
can
of
get this
sweaty
guy to
sheets,
think I
with my
left.
dream floating through my mind like a ghost whispering in the wind. My fingernails were crusted with blood. I was dog-tired and famished.
He's still down.
Wearily, I crawled out of bed, found my way downstairs, and ate a hearty breakfast. The house was library quiet. Ma must have slept in. This was highly unusual. I tiptoed to a bedroom door and waited. I was too scared to knock. My legs and hands were trembling, my legs ready to buckle and fold at any given moment. Ma? I said, quietly, as the not disturb her. Ma? Alright. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. Maybe she went into town to gather supplies. Maybe her and Pa were having coffee somewhere.
Oh, I did
That
way
would be
too
nice.